Dear friends, today we will be talking about the power of divine assistance. Many passages in the Baha'i writings shed light on questions such as why has Baha'u'llah appeared at this time of history? What is his vision for humanity? And what is the mission of the Baha'is in this regard? Here is one passage in a letter from the Universal House of Justice dated 1st November 2022, written to the followers of Baha'u'llah in the Democratic Republic of Congo, that addresses these questions. Baha'u'llah has appeared to humanity in this period of its adolescence, when it is in need of maturation. He has provided the means for establishing the unity of mankind, the hallmark of a mature world. The mission of the Baha'is is to learn to apply the revelation of Baha'u'llah in their individual and collective lives and in the life of their society. Through well-ordered efforts and in collaboration with many others who are dedicated to bettering the world, Baha'is strive for the transformation of the inner and outer realities of human life, and for the cultivation of spiritual and social conditions that will give rise to a new kind of people and a new society founded on unity. That this divine plan will certainly be achieved is Baha'u'llah's emphatic promise. He says, "By him who is the eternal truth, nothing whatsoever in the whole of creation can thwart his purpose." Baha'u'llah says that it is incumbent upon every man of insight and understanding to strive to translate that which has been written into reality and action. Clearly seen in this statement is Baha'u'llah's invitation to the peoples of the world to participate in the process of translating his vision into action. Otherwise, how could the building of a world based on unity and oneness be undertaken without benefiting fully from the insights of those who have experienced discrimination? How could a world based on justice be built without the full participation of people who have been the subject of countless injustices? And how could such a world be built without the insights resulting from raising generations of younger people who are to contribute not only to refining this process, but also to advancing the betterment of the world? The mission of the Baha'is is to facilitate the participation of the peoples of the world in this mighty undertaking. It is also abundantly evident that bringing about this unity is not an easy job. It's a task that lies beyond even the comprehension of any individual or group of human beings. How then will this exalted purpose for humankind be realized? How is it possible that ordinary human beings can fulfill such an extraordinary mission? The Baha'i writings make it clear that while human effort is essential, it is through the power of divine assistance in its varying forms that the vision of Baha'u'llah will ultimately be fulfilled. A deeper understanding of the concept of divine assistance is therefore essential for the success of our endeavors to serve the divine plan, and these days in the 9-year plan. And I'm happy to share a few thoughts about this with you today. The existence of a superhuman source of power is an element of faith in all the religions of the past. In the old scriptures, the general belief that when humans act with humility and kindness, they benefit from divine support or assistance is often emphasized through symbolic stories. These stories are often allegorical, and when taken literally, they descend into superstition and may even invoke memories of disgraceful actions associated with certain fanatical ideas. Such stories, without a deeper understanding of the Baha'i concept of divine assistance, adds to the confusion about religion and the belief and the practice of reliance in divine assistance may be seen in this age of maturity of mankind not acceptable and at best an act of blind faith. With the appearance of Baha'u'llah, whose teachings are ushering in the age of mankind's collective maturity, however, no issue related to divine should remain confusing. Baha'u'llah explains that God is the unknowable essence and that no human can fathom the mystery of our Creator, no matter how deep a mystic or how accomplished in any of the myriad fields of human endeavors he may be. So perfect and comprehensive is God's creation and his plan for humanity that no mind, no heart, however keen or pure, can ever grasp the nature of any aspect of his creation, nor of his bounties and grace. He then adds that in every age and in every cycle, God sheds light on the realities of all things as a way of increasing human understanding, promoting human progress, and ensuring that mankind is not deprived of God's outpourings of mercy and favors. He does this through those whom we call the manifestations of God, the prophets and messengers whose teachings are the impetus for human progress within the age in which they appear. This is how and why Baha'u'llah has shed, for the first time, more light on many of the spiritual truths of the world of existence, including on the concept of divine assistance. Baha'i teaching explains that there are two worlds around us, the world of matter and the world of spirit. That is, the world seen and the world unseen. The teachings describe the physical realm as the world of nature and the spiritual realm in terms of laws that govern relationships, relations between God and humanity and between humans. Additionally, the Baha'i teachings describe science as the discoverer of realities and explains that science is of two kinds, material and spiritual. Material science is the investigation of natural phenomena. Divine science is the discovery and realization of spiritual verities. Divine assistance can be said to be part of divine science, the science of the world unseen. The teachings further emphasize that humanity must acquire both forms because material and spiritual science are the two wings of human uplift and attainment. Both are necessary, emphasizing that the earthly realm is the mirror of the heavenly kingdom and that the material world is in accordance with the spiritual world. Baha'i writings also demonstrate how the fundamental concept of turning to a higher source of power is an element of the world of creation. Think, for example, about a seed and what it requires to develop its inherent reality. It requires the process of photosynthesis to enable it to grow and thrive, a process that is dependent on water and light, both of which are sources that are external to the seed. Other examples of an object achieving its full potential in the mineral kingdom or to move to its stage of maturity in the animal kingdom will also demonstrate the necessity for assistance from sources external to reach their full potential. We can therefore easily see that as natural a process as it is for the plant to turn towards the source of water and light, so too it is natural for humans to turn towards the source of assistance, our Creator, to receive sustenance and the ability to develop what is inherent in us. The Baha'i concept of divine assistance, as explained by Baha'u'llah, is a spiritual truth, an aspect of what we believe to be the spiritual realities of the universe. It is based on the belief that God is the source of all power and that everything in creation depends on God's assistance for its existence. Assistance that is not limited to moments of crisis, but is a constant, ongoing presence, acting as a support to all things. Divine assistance is rooted in the belief that the grace of God is transcendent and supernatural. It's a power that is divine in origin and that guides, supports, and protects us, and we can rely on it. It is an essential element of what enables us to contribute our share to the fulfillment of Baha'u'llah's vision for mankind. The Baha'i concept of divine assistance, although fundamentally spiritual in nature, does have similarities with certain scientific principles. The principles characterizing the laws of science include the consistency of their occurrence, their dependency on certain conditions to ensure that they will work, and the empirical nature of their results. That's the result are both observable and measurable. Baha'u'llah's emphatic promise on the provision of divine assistance to humans is this: we behold you from our realm of glory and shall aid whosoever will arise for the triumph of our cause with the hosts of the conquerors on high and a company of our favored angels. He further assures us that God has extended assistance to every wayfarer, has graciously responded to every petitioner, and granted admittance to every seeker after truth. The beloved guardian states that wherever and whenever the friends arise to serve, the mysterious power laden in this divine cause rushes in to bless and reinforce their labors far beyond their fondest hopes. Such statements reflect the consistency of God's promise, akin to how physical laws operate consistently. The operation of divine assistance is often described as conditional. These conditions include obedience to the will of God as expressed through His manifestation for the age in which we live. Obedience to the will of God includes adherence to the covenant, observing certain principles in life, and endeavoring to take certain actions and develop certain attitudes. Here are some examples. Abdul Baha says, the more the friends exert effort to achieve unity, the more they will witness the tokens of divine assistance. Striving to render sacrificial service is another such condition. He says, as soon as a soul urgeth the steed of high endeavor into the field of sacrifice, these heavenly forces, divine assistance, will rush forth to his aid and will render him assistance and support. Another condition is constant engagement in teaching work. He says, O ye servants of the blessed beauty. It is clear that in this day confirmations from the unseen world are encompassing all those who deliver the divine message. Should the work of teaching lapse, these confirmations would be entirely cut off, since it is impossible for the loved ones of God to receive assistance unless they teach. The receipt of divine assistance intertwined with the spiritual practices that enable individuals to draw closer to God. Such practices include prayer, meditation, the reading of the writings every morning and evening, and service to the faith and to others. The Training Institute and engagement in the Institute process are effective instruments that help foster these spiritual conditions that attract the power of divine assistance. Divine assistance is also deeply connected to divine guidance. Divine guidance is a light that illumines the heart and mind, and this light is received more abundantly when individuals strive to purify themselves and seek divine help. We are human and are given free will. The choice of action, the quality of our actions, and the nature of our attitudes are ours. Not only must we make efforts to live a life that attracts divine assistance, but we should also be open and receptive to benefiting from divine assistance by cultivating sincerity, humility, and trust in God. Divine assistance is therefore not a gift that is made available without effort on our part. Rather, engagement, action, and the right attitudes are required. This conditional availability of divine assistance is similar to how in science specific results or the occurrence of a phenomenon depend on certain variables and conditions. For example, the process of photosynthesis is affected by the existence of light, or a chemical reaction only happens when specific elements are combined. On the empirical aspect of experiencing divine assistance, although this assistance is not measurable in the same way as in material science, Baha'i teachings suggest that individuals can nevertheless witness and experience the effects of divine assistance. Abdu'l-Baha tells us in the Tablets of Divine Plan, summon the people to enter the Abha kingdom. The scope of your exertions must needs be extended. The wider its range, the more striking will be the evidence of divine assistance. The Universal House of Justice, in a letter written in 2005 about the new series of Divine Plan, notes that seeing the possibilities and opportunities before them with new eyes, the protagonists of the plan witness firsthand the power of divine assistance as they strive to put into practice what they are learning and achieve results far exceeding their expectations. And in 2009, in a message to the Baha'is of Iran, the House of Justice encourages them to continue to strive in the arena of service to your homeland and play a decisive role in society's progress. Thus, will you behold the portals of divine assistance wide open and witness the bestowals of God descend upon you in abundance. This direct engagement with divine promises that is encouraged in Baha'i writings imply that individuals can witness the result of divine assistance through their actions and their reliance on God's guidance, akin to how scientific experimentation is able to confirm scientific hypotheses. Understanding the nature of divine assistance takes on a new measure of significance when we realize that it can actually affect what we do and how we do our services to the faith. The Supreme Body, writing to a National Spiritual Assembly, says the progress of the cause depends upon many factors, and explains that some factors are directly the result of the actions of the Baha'is, and if the Baha'is will but do their part, however unpromising the prospect, Baha'u'llah is able to open doors and change conditions in ways far beyond their understanding. The first thing among what we can do, the House of Justice says, is a greater realization of the power of Baha'u'llah to reinforce the efforts of those who serve him, his emphatic promise to do, and the impotence of all our deeds without this divine assistance. So essential must be this realization that the House of Justice says any evaluation of a situation is entirely misleading if it does not take this supreme power into consideration. This is so because, in the words of the Universal House of Justice, constant consciousness of dependence upon him enables the Baha'is to formulate audacious plans and confidently carry them through to completion in the face of seemingly insuperable obstacles. And it is reliance upon Baha'u'llah that will enable the friends to do their utmost to fulfill the goals of the plan. The power of divine assistance, as described by Baha'u'llah, has been at work in the past, and it is at work in today's modern life. With obedience to the will of God attracting divine assistance, there are many stories of instant and exact obedience of the early believers to the instructions of Baha'u'llah. One is that of Haji Muhammad, an early believer who lived in Akka during the days of Baha'u'llah. One day, when in his shop, he was told that Baha'u'llah had an urgent mission for him and that he should immediately proceed by sea to one of the cities in an Arab country. Upon hearing this, Haji Muhammad immediately closed his shop, and as he left, he observed that the ship traveling to that city would be leaving Akka at any minute. Haji, mindful of the urgent nature of Baha'u'llah's instructions, unhesitatingly boarded the ship, which then sailed away almost immediately. Once on board, he realized that because of the extraordinary rush, he had not even thought to ask the purpose of his trip to this Arabian city. But now it was too late. He knew that Baha'u'llah will guide his steps. The journey was fraught with danger because the sea was unusually stormy. The danger of the ship sinking was in every passenger's mind. But Haji Muhammad was the exception, for he was confident that it would sail safely to its destination because God had given him a mission in that city. He finally arrived at his destination, and soon after disembarking, he heard two people among the crowd speaking in Persian. When he approached them, he found out that they were Baha'is. Haji Mirza Haydar Ali, that illustrious follower of Baha'u'llah, and his fellow prisoner, who had both just been set free from their 10-year imprisonment and who wanted to attain the presence of Baha'u'llah. But they were having challenges and needed help and guidance. Haji Muhammad immediately knew what the purpose of his mission in that city was. And of course, we know of numerous such examples from the days of dawnbreakers, our spiritual forebears, who arose with unquestioning faith and unhesitating obedience to teach to teach the faith despite unsurmountable obstacles and the threat to their very lives. It is equally heartening to recognize the abundance of stories of Baha'is, old and young, who are arising today to serve the divine plan, inspired by these sacrifices and relying on the same divine assistance. One very inspiring story of obedience to the will of God, as it applies to modern life in Canada, is the story of a young Canadian couple who became Baha'is when their two daughters were 3 and 4 years old. One of the first signs of this couple's transformation was their apprehending their responsibility as parents to accompany their children in their spiritual education. They reflected constantly on implications of this responsibility, especially given the prevailing Western standards in which they themselves had grown up. Among the matters upon which they meditated regularly were questions such as these: what do our children think of obedience to God, to the manifestation of God, and now obedience to the guidance of the Universal House of Justice? How to assist our children to acquire such obedience and to appreciate the importance of sacrificial service to the cause. As the girls grew older and were active in their children and junior youth activities, the mother felt she could no longer adequately teach or accompany them. She felt her family was now a team serving the divine plan together, and that the next step in the spiritual progress of the children was for them to learn to rely primarily on God and not on their parents. The girls began a year-long study of the Dawnbreakers with a small team of youth, a study that it was hoped would establish a standard of sacrifice for them that would guide them their whole life. When the girls were 16 and 15 years old, the family heard of a call by the institutions for youth experienced in starting up junior youth groups to serve in a faraway cluster known for its harsh climate. Recognizing that they fit the criteria, the girls said they should respond to this need, but they did not expect their parents to agree. However, upon hearing their daughters' aspirations, the parents thought there was no decision to be made on their part other than fully supporting them to pioneer. The girls' first thought was that their parents' support meant that the whole family would move to the pioneering post. When they realized that it would be just the two of them, the stories of the early believers they had been reading about in the Dawnbreakers immediately came to their minds and confirmed them in their decisions. As a family, they weighed the cons and pros of their move, talked about the quality of education in the pioneering post versus their current home, the missing of the sports they so love, and the pain of leaving many dear friends and their loving family and their dogs. Throughout all the decision-making process, the two youth kept in mind the fundamental reason for the call for pioneers, and ultimately decided to go ahead and do it. The two youth, 15 and 16, left their comfortable dream family home to settle in a pioneering post that did not offer many of the material privileges they had been enjoying throughout their lives. They readily and joyfully accepted all of this, having been moved and inspired by the heroic stories of the Letters of the Living and their unrestrained teaching efforts. Their farewells to the youth they had to leave behind inspired some of those friends to offer their time to serve as junior youth animators to replace the two who would now be leaving. Saying goodbye to their teachers and friends was sad, but it created a chance to teach the faith and led to a youth gathering where classmates learned about and became interested in the junior youth program's community benefits. The two girls since then have said that staying in their pioneering post was joyful, even though they desperately missed their family and friends. However, with the power of divine assistance and many confirmations, they felt transformed. As soon as they arrived at their post, a junior youth group with more than 35 attendees kept them busy, while the junior youth group at home was also flourishing. Even though their stay had to be cut short due to COVID-related limitations, other home front pioneers have settled there, and the cluster now is attaining new heights of progress. Another example is what one of my Canadian friends recently recounted to me herself, as how she managed to overcome the challenges she faced in getting herself more time to serve the faith. Her government position did not allow her to resign. Quitting the job with no government consent was not considered appropriate. She repeatedly told her supervisor that she is ready to accept all financial losses as well as other possible damages if allowed to resign. The answer was always negative, advising her that the government needs her. Many individuals would desire to have such a highly prestigious job, and that she should forget about resigning. Firm in her desire to serve the faith full time, she and her family prayed for divine assistance to solve this problem. Months passed, and a change of government took place after a federal election. Some months after the new government came to power, when her supervisor realized that she is still eager to leave the post, he told her that as much as he did not want to let her go, the new government had made a new provision that may allow him to arrange for her release. When she wholeheartedly agreed to whatever the arrangement could be, she was demoted to a lower position, allowing the supervisor to terminate her employment. She was happy. A few weeks later, to her surprise, she received a check for a 6-digit amount as compensation for being terminated. Her prayers were answered, and she got her time free for service, plus a few $100,000 in compensation, which proved very useful for preparing for the services she had in mind. The power of divine assistance is a realistic and reliable instrument for our individual and collective empowerment as we strive for the betterment of the world. With its help, trials and afflictions do not have to end in suffering, nor do they always have to be seen as outwardly dramatic. Rather, they can become the soil in which our spiritual greatness blossoms. The power of divine assistance can multiply our abilities, turning personal pain into purpose and a life of testing into one of eternal light and service. The power of divine assistance is available to everyone from among all cultures and under all settings. Now let's talk about how does divine assistance operate. Abdul Baha explains using this beautiful metaphor. The triumphant hosts of the celestial conquerors, arrayed and marshaled in the realms above, stand ready and expectant to assist and assure victory to that valiant horseman, who with confidence spurs on his charger into the arena of service. Well is it with that fearless warrior who hastens onto the field and sounds the clarion of victory. Abdul Baha, addressing those serving the divine plan, says, "You are the conquerors because the power of the Holy Spirit is your assistant." The beloved guardian, as I shared with you earlier on, also explains that wherever and whenever the friends arise to serve, the mysterious power latent in this divine cause rushes in to bless and reinforce their labors far beyond their fondest hopes. The Rizwan 2022 message of the Universal House of Justice gives us an insightful understanding of the power of divine assistance in fulfilling the vision of Baha'u'llah. Using the metaphor of the cause of God as a sacred vessel traveling in the turbulent sea of the world, with all the tests and challenges that this entails for the believers, it says, "The believers know well that whatever storms lie ahead, the arc of the cause is equal to them all. Successive stages of its voyage have seen it weather the elements and ride the waves. Now," referring to the 9-year plan, "it is bound for a new horizon. The confirmations of the Almighty are the gusts that fill its sails and propel it towards its destination. And the covenant is its lodestar, keeping the sacred vessel set on its sure and certain course. May the hosts of heaven send blessings upon all who sail within." Seeking divine assistance and relying on it in all aspects of our lives and in our services, therefore, is essential. In today's world, people routinely seek for various types of assistance for what they want to do or to accomplish. But it appears not to be such a common practice to seek divine assistance. To an individual seeking assistance, the House of Justice says, beyond any professional assistance available to you is, of course, the assistance of God, and that assistance one receives from the faith through prayer, teaching, regular study of the writings, obeying the ordinances of the faith, and steadfast perseverance in upholding his covenant. The beloved guardian explains the connections that exist between prayer and divine assistance. He says, "When we turn to God with our whole heart and invoke his name, a spiritual connection is established through which we become a channel of divine influence." As Baha'is, we should seek divine assistance in all aspects of our lives and combine it with our own exertions and efforts to achieve the goals we have set for ourselves. We can seek divine assistance not only for our protection, but also for our health, for our educational endeavors, for our children, for the flourishing of our family life, for our business ventures, and of course, for more effectiveness in our services to humanity and to the faith. In the words of the Universal House of Justice, it behooves the people of Baha to place at all times their entire trust in the power of divine assistance. We all believe in divine assistance, but if we also pray for it, act and live to attract it, recognize it, appreciate it, and share the experience with others, we will be contributing to enriching a culture that counts on divine assistance in all aspects of life, including planning and serving our community building efforts. But sharing such experiences with others may be regarded in some cultures as inappropriate, as if one is bragging about one's achievements. However, in my opinion, talking with genuine humility about one's own experience of receiving divine assistance can also mean emphasizing how everyone can serve the cause with the power of divine assistance. Such stories can also help us realize that the concept of reliance on divine assistance is not irresponsible, nor is it superstition. It is a vital element of what we believe as Baha'is to be one of the spiritual realities of the universe. It is real and it works. Such accounts will help us better understand that relying on divine assistance does not imply engaging in senseless acts, but rather that when we combine our best skills of planning, preparations, and foresights, while also relying on the power of divine assistance, doors that may appear closed will open to us. It is also important to note that relying on divine assistance does not imply that we don't need to act thoughtfully. Abdu'l-Baha, talking in the United States of America about relying on God's protection, said this: "Let no one imagine that these words imply that man should not be thorough and careful in his undertakings. God has endowed man with intelligence so that he may safeguard and protect himself. Therefore, he must provide and surround himself with all that scientific skill can produce. He must be deliberate, thoughtful, and thorough in his purposes. Yet, withal, let him rely upon God." What does divine assistance do? Baha'i history tells us that it does work in numerous ways. It can inspire us to be creative, to pursue success, to face hardship with radiance, and to sacrifice comfort and ease in the path of service. It bestows individual with greater courage, perseverance, and patience. It instills in us the fortitude to overcome our limitations. It opens doors previously closed to us. The power of divine assistance can create a practical force within individuals, empowering them to live according to divine will, to fulfill their potential, and to persevere in carrying out insurmountable tasks in the path of contributing to the betterment of humanity. It brings everlasting joy to the individual and to the family, and fosters in us a deeper understanding of life on this planet. We can also seek divine assistance for specific things. For example, Baha'u'llah advises us to seek God's assistance so that the noise and the attractions of this world will be powerless to distract us from turning unto God, and will fail to shake our constancy in His faith. The beloved guardian tells us to supplicate Baha'u'llah to assist us to overcome the failings in our own characters, and also exert our own willpower in mastering ourselves. The Baha'i writings stress that divine assistance enables individuals to overcome their lower nature, their selfish tendencies, weaknesses, inner struggles, and limitations, and to embody virtues such as love, compassion, patience, generosity, forgiveness, and perseverance in seeking to contribute to the betterment of society. In a letter written on behalf of Shoghi Effendi to a Baha'i study group, we read this: "The guardian will pray for the quickening of your soul, the unfolding of the divine mysteries, and the blessings of the Holy Spirit." In short, it's through the power of divine assistance combined with human effort, that individuals can fulfill their highest potential, which ultimately leads to personal and collective transformation. Divine assistance can also come in forms not immediately understood or recognized as assistance. This idea is echoed in Baha'i writings that sometimes a trial or a hardship may appear to be a setback, but in reality it can be a means through which divine assistance works towards purifying one's soul, enabling one's spiritual growth, filling us with strength and constructive resilience. Throughout Baha'i era, we have seen how, in the words of the Universal House of Justice, we earn our victories through test and trial. I heard of this wonderful story of a Canadian youth after completing her undergraduate studies found herself torn between various options available to her. She could see herself either following the same path as her peers and continuing to move through her education without a break, or taking a break and dedicating a full year of service during the crucial years of the 9-year plan. Her heart's desire was to fulfill one of the international goals of the plan. She explored with determination all the opportunities for international pioneering, yet each time a door opened, it soon closed. Various conditions that each pioneering post required, visa issues, shifting plans, and the needs of the international community, as well as repeated setbacks, tested her resolve. For months, she experienced disappointment and was concerned she may have made the wrong decision and that her hopes of rendering this period of service would not come to fruition. Still, she chose to trust in God and continued to persevere. Eventually, a path of service that was rather different than the one she had initially envisaged emerged. She began to serve in a neighborhood of focus in Europe. Despite further challenges, she arrived and threw herself fully into the work, serving from early morning to late at night, immersed in community building efforts. The joy of service inspired her to delay her professional studies beyond her original thought. Commitment to the process of the plan in the neighborhood opened new possibilities and assisted her to gain a deeper appreciation of the role youth can play. Finally, after months of service in the neighborhood, her commitment, dedication, and experience prepared her to fulfill her original heart desire. In consultation with the institutions of the faith, she committed to an additional 2 years of service and is now settling in a country fulfilling an international pioneering goal of the plan. Looking back, she recognizes divine guidance and assistance supporting her at every turn. What happened as a period of 1 year of service has now become a profound journey of learning and purpose that has been transformative. The obstacles and setbacks proved to be a guiding light with abounding confirmations. Examples of divine assistance are abundant in Baha'i history. In its Rizwan 2015 message to the Baha'is of the world, the Universal House of Justice asks these questions. Is not the history of our faith filled with accounts of inauspicious beginnings but marvelous results? How many times have the deeds of a few believers, young or old, or a single family, or even of a lone soul, when confirmed by the power of divine assistance, succeeded in cultivating vibrant communities in seemingly inhospitable climes? You know, friends, numerous are the stories that this statement brings to mind. Recall, for instance, the story of Hyde and Clara Dunn, affectionately known as Father and Mother Dunn, whose steadfastness and sacrificial services form a brilliant part of Baha'i history. As you may know, they left their comfortable life in California to open Australia to the faith when they were in their 60s and in poor health. Their 60s those days would be equivalent to one's nearly 80s today if we were to take into account the average age 100 years ago and today. They suffered various hardships and their early efforts met with little visible success. Yet their sense of purpose was unwavering. With the power of divine assistance and their spirit of self-sacrifice, they illumined a whole continent with the light of the new revelation. With such speed that only 12 years later, the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Australia was elected. Today, some of the most vibrant clusters of the Western world engaged in community building efforts are in that country. The story of a lone British soldier, Eric Manton, often rings in my mind. Eric had lost one of his eyes in the World War II and was searching for world peace. He became a Baha'i and immediately arose to play his part in contributing to the fulfillment of Baha'u'llah's vision for mankind. He did so by responding to the call of Shoghi Effendi for international pioneering. In 1952, with no knowledge or experience of Africa, he went to what was then northern Rhodesia. This single individual's effort, blessed by the power of divine assistance, resulted some 15 years later in the formation of the National Spiritual Assembly of the country, which is now called Zambia. The dedicated services of thousands of Zambian Baha'is continued through the ensuing years, and today the Baha'i community in that land is building its first Baha'i house of worship while offering numerous educational programs focused on capacity building to its members and to a large number of people from wider society, including to the Lunda population in Zambia and two of the neighboring countries, Angola and the Democratic Republic of Congo. The history of the progress of the faith in Canada is among the most thrilling examples of the power of divine assistance. It recalls to mind the inspiring story of May Maxwell, a true spiritual heroine of the Baha'i faith in the West, whose trials led to her spiritual growth and who, with steadfastness and reliance upon the power of divine assistance, accomplished such stellar achievements that it is difficult even to imagine how any one person could accomplish so very much in a single lifetime. May Maxwell was, as you know, a refined, cultured, and spiritually sensitive young woman with many worldly privileges. From a young age, she struggled with health issues. In 1898, she met Abdul Baha in Akka. This encounter utterly transformed her and, in her own words, raised me from the dead. Ignited by the power of divine assistance, she returned to Canada and faced many challenges, including the social pressures of being part of an unknown religious minority. With her husband, William Sutherland Maxwell, she opened her home in Montreal to seekers and became a tireless teacher of the faith. In 1912, a few years after their return to Canada, Abdul Baha visited this country, whose future he proclaimed was very great, and the events connected with it infinitely glorious. In 1948, the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Canada was formed, and today Canada is building the first national house of worship in the Western world, And in every province of this beautiful land, thousands of Baha'is of all backgrounds, in collaboration with many of their neighbors, friends, relatives, and co-workers, are engaged in learning how to build communities shaped by the divine teachings. The life of Mae Maxwell is a luminous example of how spiritual longing, emotional sufferings, and personal inadequacies can, through divine assistance, be transformed into powerful service, resilience, and sanctity. Reflecting upon the singular accomplishment of Abdu'l-Baha, our perfect exemplar, we will see that, referring to the mighty undertaking of his travel to the West, the Universal House of Justice says, "By any earthly measure, Abdu'l-Baha would have seemed ill-prepared to carry out the task before him. He was 66 years old, an exile since childhood, with no formal education, a prisoner for 40 years, in failing health, and unfamiliar with Western customs and languages. Yet he arose without thought of comfort, undeterred by the risks involved, and utterly reliant upon divine assistance to champion the cause of God. He interacted with diverse peoples in 9 countries on 3 continents." If Abdu'l-Baha relied on the power of divine assistance for what he had to do, so much more should we. A study of the message of the Universal House of Justice dated 28th of November 2023 to the Baha'is of the world reveals how what the faith has achieved today came about as a result of the sacrificial and devoted labors of generation after generations of Baha'i individuals and families relying on the power of divine assistance. It was through the combination of sacrificial efforts and reliance on the power of divine assistance that the administrative order of Baha'u'llah, an instrument through which the peoples of the world can work together towards fulfilling Baha'u'llah's vision, was established, and the Universal House of Justice, the instrument for the continuation of divine guidance to mankind, came into being and began guiding humanity. And today, 62 years later, we are able, under its guidance, to work with people of all backgrounds attracted to his vision, to build at the grassroots the havens that will shelter humanity. By embarking on the new series of plans launched in 2021, the Baha'i community entered a special period in its history. The 9-year plan, in the words of the House of Justice, will make demands of the individual believer, the community, and the institutions reminiscent of the demands that the Guardian made of the Baha'i world at the outset of the 10-year crusade. That same power of divine assistance that guided the early believers in Akka, that supported Father and Mother Dawn and countless other teachers, administrators, and pioneers of the cause of God in every stage of divine plan, and which has transformed the life of many Canadians, is seen in abundance today as soon as any pure-hearted believer steps into the field of action in response to the calls issued in the 9-year plan. A couple in their 50s, reflecting on how to further respond to the call of the 9-year plan, given that their children had recently left home, began to consider the possibility of pioneering. They prayerfully decided to move to a neighborhood within their own cluster as recommended by the cluster agencies. This meant leaving behind the comfort of their beautiful home in an affluent area and relocating to a high-rise apartment in a neighborhood characterized by subsidized housing and economic challenges. The question lingering in their mind was this: would they be able to get the process of community building going in their new neighborhood? What they couldn't envisage was the way divine assistance would open doors to them that they couldn't have imagined. Committed to the framework for action, they began by forming genuine friendships with local families, and a spirit of collaboration began to take root. Among the first signs of receptivity was the interest of a group of junior youth who were eager to initiate a homework club. Wondering if the proposed activity was sufficiently aligned with the spiritual aims of the community building process, the pioneers humbly trusted in the capacities of the youth and, relying on the power of divine assistance, offered their wholehearted support to the homework club. What unfolded surpassed their expectations. The local school principal learned of the initiative and shared the news of the homework widely with hundreds of families, resulting in the junior youth program to flourish. Additionally, more than 30 children began to attend children classes in the neighborhood. This initial act of service became a gateway to deeper conversations with families, touching on their hopes, struggles, and aspirations for their children. One day, the lady pioneer, received an urgent call from a mother. Concerned that it may be the start of expressing reservations to the spiritual nature of the work, she prayed fervently in preparations for talking to the mother. To her surprise, however, the mother wanted to consult with her about a deep concern over the moral behavior of the children at the school, and asked how they could work together to strengthen their spiritual education. What began as anxiety transformed into a powerful moment of confirmation, revealing a shared longing for spiritual transformation within the community. 2 years into this pioneering experience, the couple see that what initially seemed a bold and uncertain step has now become a path to a joyful life, illuminated by divine confirmation. Another example of how divine assistance can help when we do our best is the story of a nearby cluster where we live. The friends there were keen to increase the intensity of their core activities. Forming more junior youth groups was identified as a priority, and the cluster agencies were praying and looking for people to serve as animators. One of these friends, a teacher by profession, remembered a particular young woman who had participated in a junior youth group a number of years earlier, but who was in no way connected to the Baha'i community since then. On the day when cluster agencies were studying guidance and drawing some concentric circles of the potential friends to bring closer to the community building process, and thinking about the junior youth group in particular, he went to buy some treats for the gathering in a nearby cafe. There he happened to see that same young woman whom he had not seen for a long time. In the past, when running into her, he had never asked if she was interested in serving as an animator of the junior youth program. But this time, he was moved to do so. She immediately and enthusiastically said yes, she would. A short while later, she began animating a junior youth group. And following the 2024 Youth Conference in Kitchener, she attended the study circle studying Book 1. And since then, she has served as an animator for the junior youth program weekly and has attended the Baha'i holiday celebrations and deepening sessions on the messages of the Universal House of Justice, as well as reflection meetings. Friends, I am moved to share with you one more story. And this is the story of a Baha'i woman who was asked by her regional Baha'i council if she could assist with the movement of a cluster. She had previously assisted people in a First Nations village within that cluster to secure funding for a building that would provide for the education of children and youth. But she was not very happy with the invitation of the council, since she had been visiting that cluster for the past 20 years without seeing much progress. However, shortly after the council's invitation, she was invited, in recognition of her helping with the funding for that building, by the village authorities to attend the opening ceremony of that building. She traveled to that community for the occasion and was not thinking of the movement of the cluster. She was well received by those present and was offered the privilege of sitting next to the traditional chief, who was also a Unitarian minister. There were 400 people at the ceremony. As pleasantries were exchanged, she looked around and suddenly wondered what it would be like to have the Baha'i principles woven into the patterns of life of a group of people who were already working together in such unity. She began wondering how to bring up the name of the faith. Engaged in this process, she asked the chief what drew him to spiritual work. The chief explained that he became a religious minister because when he was a youth, someone recognized his capacity and assisted him to enhance it, as confirmed by the Baha'i community's experience with the Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program. The lady still wasn't sure how to mention the name of the faith, but it was here that she felt the power of divine assistance. The chief added, "You know, there is only one other religion that could work for our people." And when she asked, "What religion is that?" the chief responded, saying, "The Baha'i faith." When she asked the chief how did he know about the faith, the chief mentioned the name of a man who, many years ago, would regularly fly to that community and teach the Baha'i faith to his mother and sister. Completely astonished, the lady said that that man was indeed her it's just fascination about how these things are working. The lady said that man was indeed her father-in-law and that she is also a Baha'i herself. At this moment, some of the participants brought her a gift of a mug and a shirt with the word unity written on them. Moved by the power of divine assistance, she began talking to the audience about some of the principles of the faith and realized from the chief's responses that he is actually the one to bring the faith to his people. At that moment, all her doubts about visiting the cluster vanished, giving her a profoundly humbling experience, unlike any she had known before. She realized that it would not be her assisting with the movement of the cluster, but that the chief and other people and institutions in the village, supported by the host of the conquerors on high and a company of God's favored angels, are the ones who would be accompanying the process. And she felt deeply happy with the thought that she could play her part in this. Yes, let me just... Beloved friends, what Baha'u'llah wants us to achieve is very great. We also know that the power of human being is inherently limited and the power of divine assistance is unlimited. Divine assistance enables individuals to transcend their limitations and is thus an essential force that aids humanity in its individual and collective spiritual and social evolution. Humanity can only progress by receiving the power of the Holy Spirit. It is in this light that we can see the conception of the divine assistance as set out in the Baha'i writings as a source of strength and empowerment to individuals, families, communities, and institutions, to enable us to develop our God-given capacities, to align our lives with the will of God for this age, to become more effective protagonists of the divine plan, and to achieve the goals of the divine plan in our clusters, regions, and countries. The more we seek the divine assistance, and the more we strive to fulfill the conditions for it, that is, the more we strive to live a life that attracts divine assistance, the more we will receive that assistance and the more we can achieve. In such a state of mind, individuals or families will not set goals that they alone can achieve. Rather, they will set goals that can be achieved with the help of divine assistance. Counting on divine assistance will enable us to reflect along the following lines. If I am busy with my work and with other myriad daily affairs of this world and cannot find adequate quality time to serve the faith, let there be no doubt in my mind that if I make sincere efforts to realign my life with the will of God and make changes in my life to find time for service, divine assistance will come to my aid. If I feel inadequate to teach the faith, or if I am concerned that by talking about the faith I will not appear to be in conformity with those all around me, trusting in divine assistance will help me overcome my sense of inadequacy and allay my various concerns. If I want to engage in activities to teach the faith but become distracted by other matters or am hampered by a lack of will or discipline, let me be confident that prayer and efforts to overcome these obstacles will attract divine assistance. If I and my family wish to pioneer to a homefront pioneering post to assist with the work of divine plan, but we are concerned that we may not be able to find employment in our new locations or be able to adapt to the new way of life, consultation and divine assistance will assuredly open doors that may at first seem to be closed to us. In the face of anything that appears to present an obstacle to the services we wish to render, our prayers, supplications, consultations, and sincere efforts will attract divine assistance and progress will be made. How heartwarming it is to know that Abdul Baha prayed regularly for us to be recipients of divine assistance. He says, "Day and night I entreat and supplicate to the kingdom of God and beg for you infinite assistance and confirmation. Do not take into consideration your own aptitudes and capacities, but fix your gaze on the consummate bounty, the divine bestowal, and the power of the Holy Spirit, the power that converted the drop into a sea and the star into a sun." We will all do well to make a habit of endeavoring to live lives that will attract divine assistance and to pray for divine assistance to aid us in our efforts. In a letter dated 13th of March 1934, written on his behalf to an individual believer, the following wish of the beloved guardian is conveyed. The guardian wishes you, therefore, to pray and to supplicate the Almighty that He may give you a fuller measure of His grace, that through it your spiritual energies may be quickened, and that you may become more imbued with that Spirit which must needs animate, sustain, and strengthen every sincere and true follower of the faith. Beloved friends, thank you for your attention, and I wish you a wonderful reflection on the concept of the power of divine assistance. Thank you.